Welcome to another episode of We Don't Die. I'm your host, Sandra Champlain, author of the international best-selling book called We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. This is our very first episode of 2018. So first, I want to say Happy New Year. And I'm really committed that we each have a very special year. So I've got an idea for all of us, if you're willing to do this. My request is that all of us write down 3 things that we'd really like to have happen this year. 3 things. And if you want to write how those things would make you feel by having them come true, you can write that too. And I want us to keep that piece of paper, or if we have it on our phone or computer, somewhere really obvious that we can see it often. Here's the thing that I know about writing down dreams. Things that are written down have a really high chance of coming true. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is, I don't know if you've ever, say you're interested in buying a new car. So you've planned what car you're going to buy, you know what it is, and then all of a sudden on the highways and on the roads, you start seeing that car everywhere. Or like if you're going to go on vacation and say you bought some plane tickets to Hawaii. Well, all of a sudden you're going to start noticing people wearing Hawaiian shirts everywhere. So there's this really interesting phenomena that happens. And I believe, and I've witnessed, that those things that we write down and that we're paying attention to, they can really happen in time and space. So if you're willing to play along with me, write down 3 things that you'd like to have happen in 2018. And it can be things like getting a new job. It can be things like having a great relationship with your loved one, even though their body is no longer here, be getting a lot of signs from them. It can be opening up your own spirituality or your own mediumship or psychic ability. It really can be anything, but something that's important to you, really important to you. And anyways, so if you're willing, I invite you to do that. And remember to keep that piece of paper handy so that you can look at it daily. Okay? So that's my 2018 request for all of us. And Happy New Year. Now, on to the show. Our guest today is a Facebook friend of mine who has really inspired me by what he posts and what he's up to. And I've always had this strong feeling like we need to talk to this guy. So his name is Stig Bertelsen, and he is a Copenhagen-born rock and roller who lives in the south of Sweden. Stig trained as a shaman and is trained in healing and has a newfound interest in physical mediumship. In fact, he's working with a team writing a book about Dr. Dinshaw Nanji. Through Leslie Flint, he has had some extraordinary contacts with his wife, Annie, over quite a long period of time. Really fascinating. Stig is certainly someone who is trying to help us spiritual seekers communicate with each other, and I'm so delighted that he said yes to being our guest today. Stig Bertelsen, a warm welcome to We Don't Die Radio.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It is great because you and I have corresponded so much on Facebook, and now to hear your voice, it's awesome.
Yes. I was busy scribbling down my wishes here, and it's 3 electric guitars.
That can happen. No.
Yeah. You know, like what I say about electric guitars, that you can't get too many. That's the only thing you can't get too many of.
You're so funny.
Electric guitars.
How many do you have?
12.
Let's talk about this first, because when I look at your Facebook page, there's so many pictures of you in a band. And can you just talk a little bit about what you do with music?
Yes, I started. I've always loved music from when I was a little kid. I always. I wandered around in the forest and in the streets and everywhere, and I was always singing or drumming on my knees, and especially the Beatles songs, because I was a toddler when the Beatles came.
Wow.
So I was singing and all the time, and that wasn't something that my parents and my friends always liked, but I did it anyway. And sometimes I was out in the forest or by the shore at the West Coast where we lived, walking or wandering around, minding my own business and singing and so. And when I grew up, I started to get interested in the 1976-77 punk rock movement that was a part in New York and Los Angeles and some cities in USA and in England and in Scandinavia and France and so Germany. And I started to play. Not very good, and I'm still not very good, but music has helped me get through a lot of hardships during my life, and it's also giving me a lot of good experiences and a lot of good friends.
I bet, yeah.
And it's always helped me to organize things and also to sort of believe in my things, but because I was also, believe it or not, very shy when I was younger. So the thing to jump up on a stage and starting to play for sometimes a hostile audience, that was really, really something to do. Where I really had to hold myself back for not fleeing the stage or just stopping. Getting away, but the plain joy in playing was far exceeded the stage fright, of course. Not of course, but anyway. So I started to write my own songs, and the latest and maybe last project is that I do write songs in a band I have here in my hometown, and we play songs that I've written about my, that's not original in any way, but I play songs and write lyrics in my native language, Danish. Mm-hmm. And it's also often songs about my upbringing and my childhood and so on. And that has given me really great joy. And the music is like, you should say a mix of David Bowie's Ziggy Stardust period and Iggy Pop and that kind of glam rock type of music.
Wow. Is there a way we can listen to your music somewhere? Is there any of it online?
Yeah, it is, but I've been I'm not that satisfied with recordings yet, but I was actually, before we started here talking, I was planning on see if I could because they are on SoundCloud, some of the songs. So and there's also a little story for the English spoken to what I'm singing about, some pictures and so. So I will send the link that you can put on.
Yes. And whoever's listening right now, that link might very well be on this episode by the time you hear it. So if you just scroll beneath the episode and just peek from time to time to see, I'm just curious. Yeah. Anyways, let's talk about this world of life after death and how I met you. I don't even know what group I met you in on Facebook, whether it was my group or your group or somewhere else. But we share a mutual interest in learning about the afterlife.
Yeah. There's the thing about that we were talked about, and it's also where I started to notice your page and your shows. That it was because you talked about grief, and you talked and wrote about that you had a immense fear of dying.
Yes.
On a period of time, and I had that too, and I discovered, or that something came to my mind that the only way to get rid of it was to plunge. So dive deep down in it to face it. It's the normal way that you do KBT and all those therapies. I didn't know that at that time. So I was thinking I have to learn as much as I can about it. And I've always been interested in reading about different religions and philosophies, and so that was nothing strange to me. But this time it was for real. So I had to really, really, really get into it, because I knew, or I felt that I wouldn't survive if I didn't do it, because I was afraid. I was in periods I was afraid that my heart would stop, because I was so scared.
Oh, fear is a terrible feeling, isn't it?
It is. It is. It's really, really, really. And I also discovered that fear changed my perception. So I was sort of deep down inside. I thought I have to do something about it. I have to read, and I have to search everything that I can find. So I read every book I could find, and the internet wasn't that. Well, there wasn't any internet by then, so I had to read books at the library and go to lectures and so. And suddenly one day I read, and that was, I still remember it, because it was one day I read a little article, in a tiny article in a daily paper about monks in I think it was in Turkey, or somewhere there in the Arabic, Turkish, or the Orient, actually, that they were sitting together to and singing or chanting or meditating. I don't really know, but they did it to be able to experience God, or the God source, or whatever whatever we want to call it. And that they couldn't do it alone, because the source and the force was so strong, so immense, that they have to be several of them. And I think Carlos Castaneda wrote about it, but somewhere. And when I read it in the newspaper, also I saw it as a kind of confirmation, and it was like dying in my head. And I looked out the window, and I looked at the moon, because there was a full moon, and I looked at the clouds that were passing by, and I suddenly think, yes, there is something. It's not just, it doesn't stop here. There is something. And suddenly after that, it started to, my fear sort of vanished over a period of 2-3 weeks. But it was also that when I had that during the time when I had that fear, there was also that I sort of went, and that's very strange, because it seemed like I was doing my everyday job and minding my everyday business, but at the same time in my mind I was doing a journey through the times, back to the Big Bang, to where, and even before the Big Bang, where everything started. So that those two things happening at the same, the fear of dying, but also the traveling, and that took. It wasn't only in an hour, because it was every night, and it was really like, there was like torture. So it was a plague. It was horrible.
What part was torture?
It was the thing that when you try to live an ordinary life, go to work, and you have your kids, and do all ordinary activities. At the same time, in your mind, you're doing something completely different that is so big and so vast and so beyond time, and it was overwhelming.
Yes, I get you.
It was so hard to not just, as it was hard to do those things at the same time, and not telling kids or my wife about it, what happened at the same
Right.
time, because I couldn't actually explain it. But I went through that, and after that article, I think all of those things it just sort of got less and less painful, or yes, it took energy from me, and I went to be more content with life, and so.
Mm-hmm.
But and then there was then I had a friend that had had a girlfriend, and I talked to him about all these things because we haven't met for many years, and he said, I have my girlfriend, she is a shaman, and I was I can arrange that you can meet her, so when she come down you can you can meet. And by then I had been in a workshop with several others, and I had been making my own shaman's drum, and so, but I didn't really know how to use it. So I was really eager to meet that woman. And she came down, and she was really something. And she was trained in the Nordic shamanism, and that is she was influenced by the faith or the myths and the traditions from the Nordic countries, with with runes and the old Viking alphabet, and with fortune telling, and with singing, and doing visionary travels out in the outdoors sittings during all night, and so with vision quest, as they call it in the Native American tradition.
And a shaman, let me just be clear, shaman is someone who's like a healer who can see between both worlds, who's kind of psychic. It's one of those kind of people, right, through the Indian tradition.
Yeah. It's not only Native American,
No.
because the shamans has been all around the world, and from Siberia, and the Inuits in northern Canada and Greenland, and even the Japanese, and down to Chile, and so the definition of what a shaman is a sort of a healer, or how do you say, magician, that are not walking, but working with spirits, or spirit forces. And if you have 10 scientists that are, scholars in indigenous culture, you get 10 definition of what a shaman is.
Interesting.
But it's often that you work with the spirits, but also sometimes with herbs, and you do counseling and so forth. But what she learned me was to, and that's the really important thing. That was to make my own methods, my own songs, my own spells, my own routines, my own herbs, my own pouches to have herbs in, and so on. That I was the captain of my own spiritual ship, so to speak.
Yes, I love that.
And that's what I call it has been, and I call it the cat's way, or the way of the cat, or how do you want to say it? Because I have never followed a school or been to some of the expensive workshops and courses, and so that's there are really many of around the world. Mostly because I'm not that keen on traveling, and I have never had so much money. Right. So the necessity was that I had to bring my own stuff, my own act together.
Yeah.
But I had teachers, masters, so to speak, and she was the first, that woman. And that woman. It sounds like Monica Lewinsky and Bill Clinton here.
I hadn't even thought of that.
I have never drum with that woman.
Oh my goodness. I think it's important to mention, Stig, that when you just said you're captain of your own spiritual journey or your spiritual circle, each one of us, I think, we're brought together by this life after death world. It could be grief, could be looking for your own abilities, your own spirituality. But it's for each one of us to remember that we're on our own journey. So it may not be exactly the way you do it or I do it or someone else does it, but for each one of us to pick up along the way those tools and that work best for us, or those words that ring true as truth to us. Find our own journey, make your own methods, like you say. I love how you say that. We're each the captain, and use what works and find those things, because we are on this individual journey, right?
Exactly.
I love it.
And that's you have to make your own toolbox, so to speak. And
yes.
it's like a medicine man bundle of things that you collect. And there's also a joy in that. And that's sort of the charm in doing shamanistic work, because you're often outdoor. You're an outdoor man or woman. Often you go out in nature, or you listen to the winds, or you deal very much with nature, and that's something that is the feeling when the first time you're out in the forest during night, all on your own, and you are not afraid of the dark. That feeling is absolutely incredible. Because, excuse me.
I think of fear. When you just said that, I thought, oh my gosh, would I do that? Yeah.
Yeah. And the first time I was, when I had made my own drum, my Shaman's drum, it took 1 year to do it the old way. And I took it with me, and the guy that helped us do the drums, he said, because he had worked in Lapland and he had worked in Siberia, so he really knew his way around when it came to drums and how to use them and the techniques. So he said, well, you have to go out. First time you play it, you have to go out on a full moon night, out in the woods by yourself, and drum to the winds and to the spirits and to the land spirits and everything. And I know the first time I went out and I parked the car and I walked for for some distance. I was sweating like crazy, and I was thinking, what the hell am I doing? I was so afraid of the dark, and I think, here I am walking out in the dark and up on a little hill, and starting to pounding my drum for the spirits or the ghost or whatever. I was sweating like crazy.
Of course.
So well, I did it anyway, and after a while, then I discovered I got so used to be out in the woods by myself, and even also during nighttime. And yeah, it's so in this part of Sweden where I live, there aren't any dangerous animals of any kind. There are there are snakes, but they are not out in the dark, and they're not especially venomous, and there are no big predators in this part. No bears, no wolves, or so. There is a wild boar, but they don't do anything. The only thing you have to fear when you're out in the woods in this part of Sweden is a man.
Yes.
Human beings. So when you're out in the woods, you are safe. You are really safe. Or the only thing to fear is your fear.
Yeah. It's so great that you said to get through your fear. You really have to go straight through. This is my words, but walk right through your fears. And
yes.
Yeah, fear can be so crippling. Wow, that's a good lesson right there. Hard as it may be
Mm.
to do. So, what did the shamanism bring you? Like, what kind of things are you do you do as a shaman?
Um, I started to when I started, I was the dumbest kid in the block on the block because nothing happened. Because I discovered that my mind was so scattered with everyday thoughts of everything. I couldn't hold a thought for a longer period than 2 minutes. I had the attention span of a goldfish, and it was so hard for me to do it, and that made it almost scared me. I was shocked by my inability to actually focus to do the drum travelings and so I had to really practice and practice and practice and you know when you have small kids or you have neighbors and you live in town, you can't be banging on a drum during the night. So I had to figure out other ways to do that pounding that you do for doing the
Hmm.
drum travels, and you just need them in the start. But shamanism for me was a sort of safer way to get the bearings in a spiritual how do you say achievement or development. I mean development, and it also gave me. I had to learn a lot about plants. I started to be very aware of winds and scents in the woods and the clouds and everything in nature became your friend.
And it sounds like
So,
you had to
so
be in the present moment to observe. I mean, if you're going to observe the wind and
yes,
nature, you kind of have to
yes,
quiet your mind.
yeah. But the thing is, or my way, because I'm a quite lazy guy actually, if I should be really honest. So you don't make it too hard on yourself because it's like it's like when you try to start jogging. If you wait for the right moment to have the right clothes, the right shoes, the right wind, and the right weather, you'll never start.
Right.
So you just have to find a person or a something that can help you get started, and then when you sense that now I'm on my way, then you can do it on your own, and that development and that joy in finding your own songs and finding your own methods and so and your own experiences, because after a while you yeah sort of also from the beginning you start to experience things that you can't explain with the normal science, the 3D world that we live in daily.
Like what kind of things
Something.
could you experience?
Yes, I could sense when I sat out in the woods or on a meadow that something came and started to caress my cheeks on both sides. First on the one side, like when you do it with sort of with a kid,
Hmm.
you stroke, you softly caress the cheek on both sides, first one side and then the other. And I looked around and there was
Nobody there.
nobody.
Right.
Yeah, I sensed very often voices very close, and even if you were sitting on a meadow and there there was nothing there because the sun was up, it was sunset. Because they say that the gateway between the worlds open when it's sundown or sunset.
Interesting.
Yeah, and there's a moment where the animals they silence down, and the wind stops, and everything goes quiet for just a brief second, and it's there that they say that the gaze and everything gets possible. I don't know if that's true or not, because but I know that things happened and still do when you're out like that on your own. And there's many people that, but often we don't notice it because we're so preoccupied with everything, or
Exactly.
our fear stops it. And I have also, when we sat meditating, you could hear people walk along a little road where, not a road actually, but a small path where they went to the mill, because the road was so narrow, so they couldn't have a horse and carriage, so they have to walk. And you can sit there and you can see there were nobody there, because it was also sundown, sunset. And you can actually follow the voices from one side to the other, from left to right, and they were walking and they were talking and casually talking about, I don't know what they were talking about, of course, but nothing dramatic or so, just people as they lived their life before, in the old age. In the old
Incredible.
days.
And I can't help but think for all of us, because we talk about it so much on this show. And like you just said, when our mind is busy,
Yes.
we're not aware. But the other world, the afterlife, whatever we want to call it, I believe is right here. And to the access to it is a quiet mind. It is having that intention, whatever that may be. And I think through you developing shamanism, you're now starting to be able to, feel the touch on your cheeks or hear those conversations, and starting to detect that other world.
There was also the spider web. That's actually something that everybody that are listening can experience if they're walking in a forest, or on actually it's better if they're walking on a meadow, so to speak, where there are no trees, and they suddenly feel like there's this soft spider web coming over their face, and they're disappearing very, very softly, not in a scary way, of course, but like a caress. That is often from the nature spirits, the elementals, like they call them, and that's also a sign for you to notice if you're out, and you just have to say thank you and be happy, because they are giving you a sort of greeting, to telling that they're happy that you're there, and that happens so often when you start to notice it. As it was like one time when I was, because I'm often in doubt myself, like everybody, and I was out walking, and that was when my father had died, and I was so stricken by grief, and I walked along outside where I live, but there's no forest here because it's agricultural areas. So I was walking along the fields, and it was a sunny day, and it was so beautiful, but I felt so low. It was dark inside myself. I was so depressed or sad. And I shouted out loud, if there is somebody or something here that is if there's something to this spiritual thing, I have to have a sign, because I'm losing my faith, or I'm losing my belief. And then nothing happened. So I walked.
Isn't that disappointing?
Yes, but I just walk about 100 footsteps, or 20, 30 meters, like saying in Europe, and then I heard something, a swooshing sound, and I turned around and looked, and I saw came a flock of white swans flying over me, towards me, and they did a big, not that big, but a circle around me, a big circle around me, and it was so beautiful. And then they did one circle, and then it went on the direction that I was aiming from the start, and I was just, wow.
That's special.
Yeah. that was something. That made my day. It
Of
lightened
course.
my spirits also, of
And
course.
that's a pretty obvious sign. I mean, things can be
Yeah,
subtle. And your
yeah,
dad died, did you say 4 years ago?
yes.
Yeah, and no matter what we believe in grief, it can be so painful.
Mm, that's true. And because when you work in your daytime life and you have 100,000 things to do, and the kids grow up and go to college and university and so on, they have their problem. You have to help them with this and that, and so I started to drift away from the spiritual dimension or the spiritual ways. I hadn't done any outdoor shamanism or anything for quite some years. But when my father died, I really sensed, because I was so sad.
Hmm.
I really felt that I have to get into this spiritual. I needed. It was like I was thirsty. I needed that spiritual water, or
Yes.
I have to fill myself up with it again. But it was there was no natural way that, because I thought I had lost my drive, or my ability or whatever. I didn't know how to start. So I had to start searching again, and I didn't know where to start, because the teacher I have had, and there was in 5, 6, 7 of them, the masters I call them, because jokingly, but
Hmm.
they were not anywhere near, so I couldn't use them for my own good, to help me there. So I started to search the internet, and then I came across a lot of I started to just look at I started to be interested in what, just for the fun of it, to start to look at the UFO phenomenon. Because when I was a kid, I was so fascinated by science fiction and
Yes.
UFOs and everything. And so I yes, that was really fascinating. So I started to see what has happened the last 20, 30 years. So I started to check out the internet and see what happened. And uh, to my really big amazement, they had started to talk very much about spirituality. That those that had contacts with or channeled different entities, or
Hmm.
what you want to call it, beings. They talked very much about spirituality, and that spirituality and what they were saying was so similar to what I was used to in from shamanism. So I was, wow. So I started to get more interested in that, and gained a lot of knowledge in that area too. When I contacted people and got into Facebook groups, and started to interest me a lot of things in that. But there was quite a few egos there in the UFO communities around the world, and they were often
Right.
contradictions in what they were believing or teaching, and somebody just into fear, to install fear in people,
Mm.
and
Sure.
like dystopian visions of the future or the society. So I couldn't take that any longer. So I started to go back in my grief also to search for proof, more tangible proof. And I knew that before, a long time ago, they're up to the 60s, sort of, that there were this thing that they called physical mediumship. So I started to search the internet, and I soon discovered, when I knew what I was looking for, that there is, in fact, very much physical the mediumship going on around the world, and both in the United States and in Great Britain and Denmark and Sweden and I guess in the Spanish-speaking countries, to the Latin countries also, of course.
I'd
But
love to talk to
yeah.
you. I'm sorry to interrupt a little bit more about
Mhm.
this because I was just introduced to physical mediumship, I think, just over a year ago. And I thought, you've got to be kidding. Like, I can't imagine these things
Mhm.
really happening. And if you're listening right now and this is the first time you've heard about physical mediumship, it's, I think, kind of a rare kind of mediumship, but it's something where people can actually materialize in flesh. It's done under most of the times dark, which leads our minds to think that it's not possible. But there was even a gentleman named Leslie Flint, who we'll talk about, who was able to have people's loved ones come through and speak in their voices. And I mean, really incredible things, not just how we know about mediumship today, I think, is this evidential mediumship, medium tapping into your loved one's energy and being the mouthpiece. But we can talk about it more, but I had a great experience going to Banyan Retreat in the UK and witnessing both David Thompson and Scott Milligan. But right now, this is what I'm passionate about. What else is possible? And when you and I spoke just a few minutes before recording and you started saying that these people are meeting in circles all over the world, I'm thinking, are they? How do you know? What did you find out? Yeah, I mean, would you talk a little bit about just some of your findings that this is really alive and well? It's just not, I don't think too many people know about it.
Yes. Well, I must say absolutely no expert on
That's okay.
anything when it comes to physical mediumship. But I have followed what I've discovered or heard about, and so and also experienced a little bit myself. And I thought for a very long time that the only thing existing was sort of a mental mediumship,
Right.
where there is a medium that are channeling either by saying. Yes, I have a loved one here, and they are telling this and that. That have brown hair, and they have a blue dress, and they are smiling, and uh, they have a necklace and or whatever,
Right.
and they are saying that you should be happy or so. And I was not interested in that because I want to be, as I said before, captain of my own ship, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually was at this seance where I fell asleep, and it was very embarrassing because I sat next to the medium, and she was so boring. So I fell asleep, and I snore loudly.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that was really embarrassing. But she got so nervous also. So when she came to me, all her predictions or all the things she gave me, it was just rubbish. Not rubbish, but it was gibberish.
Right.
When you say that, I could do it better myself. I thought so. I wasn't that interested in it, but I also knew that I was not. It wasn't the sharpest knife of the cutlery, of course. So
Mm-hmm.
but actually, physical mediumship. I thought that was something from it was non-existent today because there were a lot of fraudulent people, and it was just something to trick people with. I discovered, or what I read was, on the contrary, absolute opposite. So I soon found out when I studied a little more that there are circles around the world. Often it's people sit in home circles. They did it before also, but they sit in home circles and they practice in dark, the same group year after year after year to get contacts with the loved ones or physical how to say phenomenon happening and so. And if you follow the circles and the Facebook updates and so, you will find there's quite a few circles that have had astonishing results also. And that is alive and kicking, but it's very, very, very difficult. But it's not impossible. and that's the thing. It's not impossible, and it's real as you and me.
Have you been to
So
some of the seances and witnessed any phenomena?
yeah, I've been I joined a group in Denmark, or an organization, because I I felt the longing for my Danish roots, and I also had to. I had to start to go to Denmark again, because in my grief, it was everything in my upbringing and background. So I was thinking of doing the two things at the same time. So I joined a group, or an organization in Denmark. So and there I witnessed table dancing, and sort of phenomenon where we did something ourselves. And then I was at the workshop with Kai Müge, the German physical medium.
Mm-hmm.
And there there was a lot of phenomenon there, I can tell you. There happened a lot of things which I can't explain in any way. And there was also the thing is with a medium in a physical mediumship, they often produce what's called ectoplasm, and that's the substance that come out through openings in their bodies, and that can shape into things. For instance, to appearances of bodies of the loved ones that have come to visit. It isn't always so, but often it can be. It's like a living substance. It is a substance in the medium's body, but it's also with the help of the group that you do, you get those results. And that's why in a mediumship circle, it's important that you sit, so you get to know each other. You have to sit in love and harmony.
Right.
Because it's a group effort. There is one that is the medium that are channeling or producing all the phenomenon, or making them happen with the help of spirit contact on the other side, a spirit team. So it's quite complex, and but the group setting is very important, and that's why most circles are closed. But yeah, because you have to know the person, the people that are in the group. So you grow together, and you advance, and you develop together, and that's to me is a sort of charming way, because it's a group effort. It's the group that makes the things happen. Mm-hmm. Of course, you have to have a medium that is sort of trained and skilled in that, and it also can grow used to those phenomenon.
Mm-hmm. Stig, feel like I've witnessed really miraculous things those couple times I went to Banyan. And it's so hard for my brain to get around what I witnessed, because everything in me says it can't possibly be. Yet I know what I saw, what I felt, what I heard, what touched me, those kind of things. And one of our listeners of the show actually came to Banyan, and, just because it's not that he had lost a loved one and was looking for evidence of that, but these stories sounded so miraculous that he's like, I got to witness this myself. And we spoke about it when the weekend was over, because it's like, nobody's asking for a lot of money. I mean, it's very reasonably priced. There's a lot of other things that happen as well. So, and there's no reason for anybody there to be fraudulent and create voices of people's loved ones and give these messages. So even though we don't understand how it could be possible, it's like everything is saying this is the truth. This stuff is real. And I think you're right. There's these groups all over the world that are keeping this private because it is subject to ridicule, right? There were so many frauds that happened in the early part of the 1900s preying on people.
Yes.
But real. I thought I was out for a walk the other day, and I just got this image in my mind of a fish swimming underwater, and is very comfortable underwater. And then one point, the fish leaps out of the water and can breathe, of course, but can see
Yeah.
now cities and people, and like there's this whole new world. But it's too much for the fish to handle. So it goes
Exactly.
back and swims in the water. And I feel very much myself like that
Mm.
fish, that what I can used to in my life is reality as where I'm comfortable. But there's a piece of me that knows I have witnessed the miraculous. And I know there are people sitting for physical mediumship. I know these things are going on. And if you're listening right now, and if this is something you're interested in, you can listen to my other shows on physical mediumship or go to banyanretreat.com. Check out that website. It's one of the very few places that you can actually witness some of this phenomena. But it's like, holy cow. So the little fish in me knows that like I want to keep jumping out of the water and keep going there. Because if that stuff was possible long ago, I say it's possible again. I say it's possible for us to be able to hear the voices of our loved ones, not through another person, but through, this kind of spiritual technology, I guess is the best way to put it. But I know it's possible. And, which reminds me, I want to ask about the book that you're, co-writing with this team, because it deals with, someone who was a physical medium, a man named Leslie Flint. Would you mind talking about that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. Sorry.
No, that's right.
I love to hear your voice. So I was thinking that you have to have your own show where you're interviewing yourself, but because you say so wise things, and
Thank you.
so
I'll do another episode this week that's just me talking, because
yeah.
I've seen so much lately that I haven't caught everybody up on that I want to. So yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
But back to you. You're the guest.
Yeah, the story about that, we are trying to make a book. We're trying. We are in the work as we're doing the work right now, and it's supposed to be a book, and it will be a book, of course. And it's the thing is that there was a medium that was very popular in England, and he had a specialty that his spirit team or spirit control helped him, strangely enough, to produce something that we call the voice box, where the deceased or the spirits could sort of get into, in some strange way, into the voice box, and with the help of the voice box that was made out of ectoplasm, be able to sort of cross over to our dimension and have a voice that is audible, and it's recognizable, and it's sort of free of the medium. And so the media, and it's fun to hear this recording, because they recorded most of the sessions from somewhere in the 1950s and up to when Leslie Flint, I think just before he died, and I don't remember, I think it was 92 or something. There's a lot of recording on leslieflint.com. And they helped me also, because when I was in grief, I forgot to tell you that, because when I was in grief and I was searching, reading about physical mediumship, I saw that name, Leslie Flint, over again. And I saw his picture, and he looked like a really nice person. He had an almost rock and roll name. So I started to, I started to listen to the recordings, and they sounded so English. They were so English, so and they were quite easy to understand, even for a Swede Dane like me. And you could also read the transcript of the recordings. And after a while, I discovered there was a couple that was called Annie Nanji and Dinshaw Nanji. and they made a lot of recordings. So there were a lot of seances. I think it was during 14 years. So I listened to a lot of those, and they were so fantastic to hear that man and wife, they could talk to each other, because the woman, Annie, she died in 1966, and Dinshaw, he was so in grief. He suffered so much, actually so much. He was so down and depressed that his daughter couldn't live home any longer. She has told me that later on. But so he took and traveled to. He lived in Gothenburg, Sweden. Had just moved to Sweden from India, and he took the boat, or sometimes flew, but often the boat, I think, to London to sit for Leslie Flint. And to his astonishment, his wife came through, and they started to talk to each other. And it's so loving, it's so heartwarming to hear them, because they talk about everyday thing, and she teases him and the man and so on. And it's so nice to hear them talk, and they talk everyday chat about what he's been doing at home, because she tells him that she comes and visit him all the time, and she tells him things about his home where he lives when he's a how do you say, widower? Widower. It's hard to pronounce, but so she tells him episodes and things from what he's doing, his activities at home.
I want,
and yes,
Stig, I don't mean to interrupt, but just like to give a visual to who's ever listening. So there's this guy, Leslie Flint, who's one of the most tested mediums out there, because you have to imagine now, this man, this ectoplasmic voice box I think it came out of his ear, and it would be like on his shoulder, and there's actually a picture of it somewhere on the internet. But through that little box, voices of people's loved ones, they would have conversations back and forth. Wasn't coming out of Leslie's mouth. He himself very often had his mouth taped shut. He gave this away. There's not like anybody had to spend money, thousands, to do this, but he spent his whole life dedicated to helping people. And on this website, which is leslieflint.com, there are countless tapes or recordings of people that had come through. And this Dinshaw Nanji, he was actually a doctor of chemistry, so very, very sharp man. But of course, the grieving process, if you hear that there's this man that could possibly bring through your wife, he traveled a great distance, and lo and behold, what you're saying, and I'm actually on the page on leslieflint.com with these conversations. And I heard the first one, that she, just a whisper of her trying to get through. And by the time you get to the last recording, it's her voice. I mean, it's clearly not a man trying to throw his voice somewhere around. It's an actual living being. His wife, even though invisible to the eyes, very much alive and very much part of his life.
Yes.
And to help with grief. Oh, wow. And so you're saying that really, that made a difference to you too, right? Listening to these audios? Yes.
It really did. And it also got me interested in, because Dinshaw, I first have to say that Leslie Flint was tested using as a tape over his mouth and so. Mm-hmm. But when he did the recordings, he was sitting idle, chatting in the room with the spirits himself. And the spirits could be heard around in the room, even if you say he has you see a picture where he has the voice box next to him or on his shoulder. So the voice could come from everywhere in the room, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I think that's right.
So he up, and that's also so fun to hear those stories, because they talk that Queen's English and they joke and they sing and they idle chatting, and Annie Nanji, she's telling Leslie Flint that she thinks he's getting fat and he has to go work out or something. So she jokes with him. So it's impossible for it to be a ventriloquist in that matter. And there's also there's a lot of thing about Leslie. He could do that not only in his room or in his basement. I think it was the basement that they used, but everywhere. He traveled around the world doing those kind of seances. So he was really something that was very, 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 and is very rare. I don't know if there is anybody out there doing that kind of voice box thing method.
If there is, they are not public about it.
No,
yeah.
Exactly.
And like I said, I think this is very prone to ridicule because my very first time doing one of these seances. First of all, I didn't tell anybody I was going because I thought people would think I'm crazy. But it happens in the dark. So what does the mind say? Why does it happen in the dark? It can't be real. It's got to be fraud. You know, I mean, that's what's right there. And so for people who are practicing this and doing this, if they were open about it, you know, people could think, oh, it's got to be fraud. But if we can picture that there's families and groups all over the world that sit every, say, Tuesday night or Wednesday night, and they sing songs and it feels good. And then, you know, next thing you know, these phenomenal things start happening. I just can't help but think there's got to be a way, if people are interested in this, to do a little bit more research and we make this alive again. If it's meant to be, I think it'll happen. But I never knew it existed. And I tell you, the little fish in me wants to stay under the water where it's safe. And sometimes it's hard to talk about this. But I know what I've experienced, and I'm excited about the rest of my life, you know, exploring this and what's possible.
But if you use that analogy with the fish in the water, is the thing is that deep down in the water you don't know what there is there. So for every spiritual being, it's better or more wise, and it's safer to be able to walk in both worlds, to have the knowledge of both not because there's many dimensions, but the two nearest. Over the water and under the water. So, but to get back to the Nanji tapes, they were. I think it was 14 years that the Dr. Dinshaw he went from Gothenburg 2 times a year in the spring and in the spring and in the autumn or the fall. I think they say in USA. And when I listened to them, and they really gave comfort in me. And along the way, I sort of discovered that they came from Gothenburg. And when I was a little kid, we moved from Denmark, from Copenhagen, and up north of Gothenburg in the archipelago up there. You lived on an island, and I discovered that Annie Nanji, she came from up there north of Gothenburg. So I felt that I sort of knew the surrounding where she came from, and that gave also a sort of confirmation in me. And along the way, I started to join a group. I think it was the Afterlife Research Education Institute group.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think it was there that we got to know each other also. And when I talked about, I mentioned the tapes that I listened there in that group, then there was 1 or 2, maybe 3 person that reacted and started to answer me back. And I found out that it was those person that had worked with those tapes for years and years and years. So we started to chat and got to sort of know each other. And one of the guys, Carl Jackson Barnes, he asked me if because I speak Swedish, if I could help him to do some investigation to try to find out more of what happened to that couple. Where did they come from? And it's all those things is there also to get sort of confirmation. So it was Carl and me. We started to talk, and then there was this guy, Jack Terrence Andrews in Tucson, that was doing the cleanup of the reel-to-reel tapes. So I got to know him too, and we started to chat. And he's a wonderful guy, very talented, and so. And then there came along a woman that's her name is Mary Beth Spanner from the USA, and we started to chat also. And us four, we started to chat a lot about those tapes because we all loved the tone between the two, and it gave us so much comfort, and it was funny. And the thing that we started to get to sort of be able to place them in the real life, so to speak. They came from Gothenburg and yada 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 and so on. That gave even more confirmation. And the more we listened to the tape, the more we got to know and like these persons that were on the tape. We sort of got to know them, and we started to really grow really fond of them. And then I don't know who it was that said, should we do something about this? Should we try to make a book or something?
Mm-hmm.
And we laughed, all of us, sort of in text laughed. But yes, but then we had talked about it even more and more, and we found that Mary Beth, she has written about 35 books about education and everything for children, school books, and so she was really skilled in that. And so you knew we could make that part happen. So I have started to do research with the help of the others, and along the way I found out they had a daughter still living. They had two daughters, that couple. So we have started to do. I called her. I was very nervous because I didn't know if she was interested at all. You know, if somebody calls and say. Hello, I've listened to recordings where your father many years ago went to see a medium. Yeah, you never know how people will react.
Of course, right.
So it took me at least 2 weeks before I could, in my mind, make up what I was supposed to say and how I was to put it forth. But fortunately, she responded positively. So we have started to do. I've started to do interviews with that daughter of those, and get to know even more. To know knowledge and facts, hard facts about them, and it's the fun and interesting thing also. If you listen to the tapes, to get those confirmations that come from during what they are saying that they wasn't supposed to know, like the spirit guide that's also always present as a young boy called Mickey. That is Leslie Flint's spirit control on the other side that helps all those conversations to actually happen. And he says things also that he couldn't possibly know. I haven't got an example here right now, but it's really interesting, and it things getting clearer and clearer, and they are getting more and more sort of not confirmation, but it's getting more and more tangible, real 3D people. That couple, and how could it be that a woman from out in the countryside, from working class, working as a servant, get to know a professor, I think it was professor or a doctor at least, from India, and move to India with him and raise two daughters, and then moved back to Sweden just 12 months before she suddenly dies. It went very fast that she dies in cancer, lung cancer. 1966. So they had to just sort of touch Swedish ground again.
It's a beautiful story. And if
Yeah.
you're listening right now and interested in hearing the tapes and seeing the picture of Dr. Nanji and his wife Annie, you can just scroll beneath this episode, and I have a link right there. Or if you don't have a place to write this down, if you even just type in Google Leslie Flint and then Nanji, that's their last name, and the page will just be the first hit that you get, and click on that at the leslieflint.com website.
So when you get into these sort of spiritual matters, you get, I know you know that too, because you had talked about it before. You get sort of small messages and confirmations all over the place, just like the spider web, that the soft, sweet, swift spider web out in the nature. And I have here in my hand, because I got a letter today from a British medium that is very, very nice and very skilled. She's called her name is Sandy Ingham, and she sent me a drawing that she made, that her spirit guide helped her to make. And it's for us, it's really close to, similar to the way that Annie Nanji looked.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So that was quite interesting. There's confirmation. There's confirmation from different direction and different places, sort of all the time.
Yes.
And it's also, it's a joy, because there's sort of a how do you call, legacy, or we feel obligated to make, because Dino or Dinshaw and Annie, they talked about in many of the recordings that they were trying to do a book about their conversation or their relationship, but they seemed to not be able to get the money for it, because in those days it was expensive to do books. And he says in one episode that, we live here in Sweden, and in Sweden they are not interested in matters like this, so they were too early on, because if they had been 20 years later, then the New Age movement had come, and they would have sold so many of those books. So we felt it was our duty to help them to actually try to make a book about it.
It'll be beautiful,
about the relationship, and that book is when it's ready, and we are when we're ready with, I think, and we are thinking to sell the book through the Leslie Flint Foundation, and so whatever comes in will go back to help restore the rest of the tape, because there's really many tapes left that is not has been digitalized even to this day, and maybe there are additional tapes because Leslie Flint, when he made, it seems like he made two tapes, one for the sitter and one for his own archive.
Yes.
So if there's people listening that has a recording or a cassette or whatever of a Leslie Flint seance, you're much welcome to contact the Leslie Flint Foundation through the website.
leslieflint.com. And if you're interested in this subject, I had a spectacular interview with our friend Carl Jackson Barnes. And if you go to WeDon'tDieRadio.com and scroll down to episode 183, it's just a fantastic episode. And he's got some samples of some of the speaking too. Stig, our time is just about out. You and I could talk for 4 hours, I think.
Yes.
But is there anything you want to share that you haven't shared so far? Or,
yes.
It's yours to share now.
Yes, I would like to say I've started a closed Facebook group where would like to allow where I have tried to gather people interested in the spiritual matters, artists, healers, mediums, and so on to make a sort of my own home, my own, but sort of a home circle, and not for a physical mediumship, but to share knowledge and tips and to help each other. And most of all, the thing is in that circle, even in these spiritual communities, and so people have a tendency, when we talk over the Facebook and social media, people they get angry at each other for pettiness, no small details, and so. And in that group, where I'm trying to get people to stay civilized, because the spiritual development of humanity in general needs people to look aside from the small everyday envious. How do you say? When they're envious,
Yes.
and so. Or let their ego get in the way, or so. So it's try to keep a loving atmosphere and the tone in whatever we are communicating, and there have started to I have started to invite quite a few very interesting people in that group. And what I would like to say, that everybody can do that. Everybody can get to connect to people and try to connect to them a little closer, and to share their stories and share their sorrows and their joys, and also things that they have discovered, or like we talk now about what you have experienced, because Scott Milligan and you said David Thompson is two of the world's absolutely now a living greatest when it comes to physical mediumship, as I have been told. I haven't been sitting with them myself, but I know quite a few that they're totally in awe.
Mind blowing is all I can say. And
Yes.
David Thompson and hopefully Scott Milligan will both be at the Afterlife Symposium this September in Scottsdale, Arizona. Not 100% confirmed on Scott, but definitely David will be there, and hopefully Scott, which if anybody's interested, go to afterlifesymposium.org. Obviously, it's not just about that. It's all things life after death, but it'll be a great time. We'll get you on an airplane sometime, Stig, or I'll come to you, because I do think we need to meet. Well, thank you so much for being our guest today.
Yeah, thank you.
Wow,
thank you. It was
great.
A pleasure.
And can anyone join your Facebook group?
No, they can't. But they can apply. Okay. And then I will try to get to know these people, and I am very good at sensing, or sensing what a person is up to, and if he or she is suitable for this kind of atmosphere. Otherwise, as I said before, anybody can do it. Anybody can set up a Facebook group and gather people around a topic or an interest or whatever. You just have to start somewhere, and if they go to the symposium or start with your We Don't Die radio shows, and so that's a great way to start.
But the people in your group, what kind of people are they? Because I know it's a very small group.
Yeah, that group is people that I have personally asked or invited. And I know that these people, I have followed them, and I know they are open-minded, and they are kind, and they have humor, and they have, even if they are, some of them are, the most of them are really enormously skilled, and they are not only spiritual people, but they're spiritual interested people. There are artists and the musicians, the writers, and so also. So I wanted to have that mix, because I think all those areas are connected. Art are, as I say, it's a spiritual matter, a spiritual subject. Music is very spiritual,
Yes,
and
I believe
literature,
so.
and so on, and so on. And I don't want to people to stand and sort of to be living in a box, when and if they don't know that the neighbor holds just that piece of advice, or a gadget or thing or information that I need desperately.
Right. Well,
So I want people to connect more,
yeah.
and
Oh,
don't
without a
be
doubt.
afraid.
On our Facebook group, if anyone has not yet joined, if you go to Facebook and you type in "We Don't Die Listeners," Stig is a member of that, and it's a good place to get to know him as well. And also, it's good to be part of a group, because left to my own devices, I sometimes forget. Yes, even me, I forget that I'm into this fantastic world, and but to have a community that's talking about the afterlife, is talking about grief, is talking about our dreams coming true, and what's the purpose of us being here on planet Earth. I mean, it's in We Don't Die Listeners. You can definitely join that and get involved, because there's a whole bunch of like-minded people that will love you, support you, and you can be open. I can be open. There's very few people in my day-to-day life. I don't know if there's any that I can just talk freely about this. But within the group of 3,000, I can say anything, and so can you. So, Stig, thank you for being our guest today.
Yes, it
Man,
was a
this was
pleasure.
great. So it's nice to meet the man behind all the Facebook messages, the fantastic artist, and you always make me smile with the messages that you send me. So thank you for all that you're doing. Thank you for being on the journey that you're on. And most importantly, thank you for sharing it, because I think service is the keys to the kingdom, when we can make a difference for someone else.
That's true.
Yeah, so great. And for our listener, thank you for spending this time with us. And I had mentioned the afterlifesymposium.org. As a reminder, go to WeDon'tDieRadio.com. Episode 183 was with Carl Jackson Barnes. If you're interested in Leslie Flint, definitely go to leslieflint.com. If you've got this little instinct, you want to find out more about physical mediumship, and you want to take a journey, this spring I will be at Banyan Retreat, and there'll be another 5-day workshop called Whispers from the Soul. Happens around Easter. It is one of the best things you'll ever do in your entire life. And you can go to banyanretreat.com. And what else do I need to say? Probably nothing. My name is Sandra Champlain, and I am absolutely thrilled that you're with us today, and that I get to be your host on We Don't Die Radio. As I said in the beginning, write down 3 things that are important to you that you'd love to see happen this year, and keep them on the front of, whatever it is you're doing. And you just watch that those things are possible, and you can keep taking little steps toward them. And I heard it said once, God will work with you, but not for you. So I think it's important that we all take steps towards our dreams. And like Stig said during this interview, you got to walk through your fears. Fear can be so crippling, but if we can just face it head on, which is tough. I know it's difficult, but there is another side. So anyways, in closing, I want to thank you for listening, and we'll see you soon.